everyone. The story that I'm going to read out today is called The Road to Upper Assam. It had first appeared in Writers Asylum. No, it had appeared in New Asian Writing a couple of years ago as The Road to Juanita's House. But after it was published, I made a lot of changes to the story and gave it a new shape. And now I call it The Road to Upper Assam. So here it is. Have you heard of Robin Banerjee? You haven't? The environmentalist who put Assam's Kaziranga on the world map? No? Well, you must not have, because he died in 2003 at the age of 94. But when we were little, his house used to be one of the most fascinating landmarks of Golaghat. We heard that he had turned his house into a little zoo which even housed a python. His personal life was nothing short of a film too. We heard that he never married because his beloved had died in a plane crash right before the wedding. He lived a bachelor till he died, and his pyre was lit by his caretaker Jitu Tamuli. Anyway, I'm not here today to tell you about Robin Banerjee's story. I'm here to tell you about Khogen Borphukon's story. He too died alone, not as a bachelor though, and was survived by his caretaker, Khudu. But before I tell you about Khogen Borphukon's story, I will have to tell you about my little stories on the road to Upper Assam. So I have decided I will tell you this story in two parts. Part 1, The Road to Upper Assam. Whenever the occasion for holiday arose, we hit the road to Upper Assam. Especially Bhugali Bihu around January, when people gathered around bonfires and devoured sweet potatoes and yam roasted in the fire. And Rongali Bihu in spring, when all along the highway one could spot groups of young girls and boys dancing the Bihu under trees, resplendent in their golden Muga silk attires. I'm talking about the 80s and 90s. On such occasions, father would get up early in the morning and even before he had tea, wash our grey Maruti van while mother packed some sandwiches, boiled eggs and black tea for the trip. We stopped at the inspection bungalows on the way to ease ourselves and to have tea, lunch and more tea. These inspection bungalows had their own lazy stories to tell. Beautiful they were, but managed badly by their caretakers, or perhaps time. A misty smell hung in the air like that of the Ittar oud. This perhaps explains why I could never excite myself over oud, one of the world's most expensive ittars. I associate this smell with those old inspection bungalows, a two-room house mostly with one room locked always, that had fallen through tough times. My fond memories are from our trips to my grandmother's place in Golaghat. It took us 7 hours by road to reach Golaghat from Guwahati. En route, we would see men idling away under the trees by the road, gossiping perhaps about life's miseries or revealing heart's desires to each other, as young girls dressed in white and blue or white and green mekhela sador strolled to or back from schools in pairs and groups. Boys in white shirts and green or blue shorts and long pants ran past or followed them on bicycles. There was a peculiar nonchalance in the air, as if nobody was going anywhere in particular, as if everybody was putting up just an act for us as we drove by in our cars, sometimes waving at us, while the blue hills watched from the distance. And thus we drove past one town after another, one village after another, rice fields after rice fields, where the lazy rays of the sun sprawled and stretched in all their glory. The cows sauntered as if they owned the roads, stood or regally sat in some shade, with their slender tails waving off flies in no hurried motion. And often in our journeys we had drizzles and rains for company. My grandmother, Aita, was about 80 years old. Her house at Purona Amlapoti, the second turn, right turn from the music school, it was one old house which had solid tree trunks for pillars and beams. The stuffed heads of deer eerily hung from wooden frames high up on the walls, almost touching the ceilings, looking down at people. But before we reached Golaghat on the highway, Meandering past lazy landscapes, we would arrive at Bukakhat, a little town where rows of small shops blazed the latest Assamese songs and Hindi film songs out of black rectangular loudspeakers. The town would be lined with shops selling peras, lusi, aloo bhaji, and jolokia chutney. We always went to the shop opposite the small Assam State Transport Corporation bus depot. There would be 2 rows of wooden tables and benches by the walls where we would sit and devour the food served in round plates made of toko leaves. Men in white sleeveless ganjis and pants rolled up to the knees would bring in the food in steel utensils and dash the food on the plates made of toko leaves. That dashing of the food on the plates was the only hurried movement in an otherwise slow doling out of events because the food took time to arrive, and every now and then the customers had to shout out, "Hurry, bring the food." There was another hurried movement there, the consumption of what was being served. No one talked, only ate. And ate with great urgency even as the fans above whirled slowly, as a few flies added music to the surrounding noise with their buzz-buzz, while the owner sat in front of the shop gazing into nothingness behind a glass counter that displayed laddus, peras, and a few flies. Back on the road again, after having packed a good amount of the famous Bukakhat peras, driving along tea plantations on either side, I often wondered who lived in that quaint bungalow that peeped out of the plantations. What did the people living in it wear? Who visited them? What did they eat? What were the bearers like? And I could almost see a woman with a forlorn expression, dressed in a beautiful chiffon sari in some pastel shade with tiny flower patterns, sipping tea in the netted veranda as she waited for her husband to return from work. I don't know why, but it was always the image of a woman that came to my mind when we crossed these bungalows. Sometimes she would be flipping through the pages of a fashion magazine in her regal bed. Sometimes she would just stand there at the veranda, leaning by a pillar and staring away at the rains while the earth smelled sweet. And always, her movements would be slow and graceful like the heroines of the old Assamese films. As the image of such a woman would fill my mind, my eyes would bring me back to the reality as women with baskets strapped to their heads dotted the tea plantation plucking leaves. By the time we entered Golaghat town, we would be going down the road with the sinking sun. The car would go round the old town hall and head for the Purana Amlapoti neighborhood. We would be greeted by the familiar houses on both sides of the road, a room or two lit by a candle. Electricity behaves like a mistress with a foul temper in this town. She never came to stay. Ida would be waiting for us in the veranda, in white cotton mekhela sador, a handful of white hair tied into a bun, going up and down and praying for a safe arrival. What she considered a long journey seemed nothing to us. "You have traveled a long way," she would tell us. "Rest today." She always made me sleep with her in her darkest dark could-be room, and little did she realize that I did not like how her room smelled of medicines and how the clock took forever to turn its hands, and I choked with fear at the rate in which tomorrow would come. The only respite to us, 7 o'clock meant bedtime for the entire household, and morning started at 5. Now we come to the story of Khogen Borphukon. The music school up ahead was in his property, and he was always seen in his black broad-rimmed spectacles behind which his magnified eyes sized everyone up. It is interesting how the music school came up in Purana Amlapoti, and it is related to Khogen Borphukon's legendary miserly nature. Everybody in town happened to know about how, in the early 1960s, he cheated customers at his Gelamal store, where he sold everything from cooking oil to hair oil, rice, lentils, sugar, salt, combs, brooms, spices, you name it. Those were the days when Golaghat was called a town, but it still had no electricity, no pakka roads. It had the town hall at the center, the most imposing building around, where meetings were held, theatre organized, and all public activities took place. Besides that, there was a government hospital and a veterinary hospital. Durga Puja was the biggest festival those days, and people, those who could, got clothes and shoes from the nearby Jorhat town, which had a vibrant commercial center. Many ascribed Golaghat's fate then to the fact that it was not connected to either the national highway or the railway line. The town had one cinema hall, an Assam-type building with kacha floor and half-brick walls. The rest of the walls were made of the reed-like ikora and plaster. Khogen Borphukon, a miser who people said mixed water with ink in his fountain pen, ate the covering of a samosa for breakfast and its filling as sabzi for lunch, just had one weakness: cinema. He forced all thoughts of having paid for the ticket out of his mind when images flashed on the screen. And the next day in his shop, which was at Amlapoti Pansali, he recuperated more than the amount spent on the ticket by taking advantage of people's confused calculations with the introduction of the Naya Paisa. 1 anna, the old currency, was now equivalent to 6 Naya Paisa. The cunning Khogen Borphukon, keeping with the changing times, counted Naya Paisa instead of anna when taking money from customers. But when he had to return money to a customer, he always counted in anna, never in Naya Paisa. So when he had to return 8 anna to customers, he would count 6 Naya Paisa aloud 8 times. This is 1 anna, 2 anna, 3 anna, 4 anna, 5 anna, 6 anna, 7 anna, 8 anna. His emphatic 8 anna would confuse customers. And in this confusion, they would accept the 48 Naya Paisa instead of the 50 Naya Paisa they were entitled to. So like this, every time he used to pinch a few Naya Paisa from his customers. Now this money that he stole from the customers, he kept them in 2 bundles. One little bundle for his movie tickets, and the other bundle he kept in a wooden box under his bed and prayed, "Prabhu, no matter what, may I never get to touch it." Stories of Khogen Borphukon's miserly nature reached impossible heights in the 80s when his daughter fell to jaundice. The daughter of a rich man died because the father refused to spend more money on treatment than he had kept aside. The mother of the girl soon developed severe depression. She could never get over the death of her daughter. There were sons, 3 of them, but she was never attached to any of them the way she was to the daughter. The sons anyway showed no concern for anything much. When father refused to spend beyond a particular sum on the treatment, none of them came forward with help, although they knew this could possibly kill their sister. Overcome with grief, the mother jumped into the pool at the back of the house one cold December morning, even before the sun went up. These 2 incidents cast an ominous gloom over the house. The sons left, saying the gloom overwhelmed them, suffocated them. They left for other towns and cities and settled down with women they took as wives there. They started life in those towns with the money they had stolen from the wooden box that Khogen Borphukon kept under his bed. Finding himself all alone in the house now, with just his man Friday for company, Khogen Borphukon found a music teacher and opened his property to the townspeople in the form of a music school. People said there was only one person in this whole wide world to whom Khogen Borphukon was generous: my Ida. He came to visit her once every week. It was like a mark on the calendar year after year. He came every Saturday late afternoon and stayed for an hour or so. That day, Ida would prepare nice round pulalu seed, crispy, light and fluffy, along with aloo bhaji, where potatoes are cut like fingers and fried in mustard oil with some sliced onions and green chilies and a dash of turmeric and salt. She would also make some omelette and serve all of this with homemade olive pickle, olives from the 2 trees in her garden. With the years, my Ida was put on hearing aid, which she often forgot to use. She blamed it on her spine that made her an old bent lady, she said with much chagrin. So when a friend came, the two of them chatted, and what the two of them chatted, it was beyond anyone's comprehension. Like the time when Khogenbor Pukon asked her, "How are you?" And she said in her sing-song voice, "The old blind shopkeeper around the bend thrashed his 17-year-old son a few days ago with a cane when he was caught with his 20-year-old widowed sister-in-law." Then another time when Khogenbor Pukon asked her, "How are your children?" she replied with a sigh, "They be damned monsters. Don't the mosquitoes trouble you? I think they've grown in numbers these days." "Yes, they do," he said. "And is your knee better now?" "Thank you for the compliment," she said. "It's been long since anyone said I look good." And for a few years, this is how they conversed. It seemed more like both were woven together by an age-old bond, and at this stage in life, it was as if acknowledging each other's presence mattered more than mere communication. Some 5 months before he died, Khogenbor Pukon donated his house with its beautiful compound, as well as his savings, to the music teacher who came on Sundays. They said he died a penniless man. He bequeathed his shop to his man Friday, who went on to build an empire of sorts in the history of the town. Over the years, the more I pursued a life of my own, desperately seeking to chart out a terrain for myself, as far removed from the life I had known all through my growing up years, in the hope and anticipation that this only could bear me the sweet kiss of success, I traveled on the road where my memories led me less and less. A time came when more than a decade passed before I undertook that journey again and was on the road to Upper Assam one more time. I was in Kaziranga on a weekend holiday with a few friends from Mumbai. The sight of the one-horned rhinoceros in the national park reminded me of Robin Banerjee just like that, like a nudge toward the lane where my childhood lay. It brought memories of my childhood road trips to Upper Assam rushing. Those trips always meant stopping by the highway in Kaziranga to spot the rhinos in the distance, standing like grey statues in the midst of tall elephant grasses. On an impulse, one afternoon, leaving my friends to entertain themselves for a few hours, I booked a cab and drove to Golaghat. I saw that the town had not changed much, but Aita's house was a sad, crumbling structure. There was no one there anymore except the old caretaker, the descendant of a loyal domestic help. And the house? It smelled of oud. Thank you for listening.